That was good. That's pretty good. My jokes aren't nearly that funny. But like honestly, I asked them earlier if I can get some sort of intro music when I walk out, like do, and they're like no. So then I was like, well, can you like beatbox me something? And they're like no. So I was like, okay. But I kid. Though, like everybody's been awesome back there. Like they're a great team, great crew. My only complaint is probably the seats here. They're like really, really small. I think people back in the old days were just like really short or something. Because like I'm 6'4", which is tall, but not like the extreme end of the bell curve. And I'm like doing some sort of weird yoga when I sit and watch these talks, which is like just like I do on airplanes too. But speaking of airplanes, yeah, I almost didn't make it here. I don't want to call anybody out, but you know, I'm just glad we're all united in JavaScript together. Just kidding, I flew JetBlue, much better. But no, today I'm going to talk about Transpilers. I know. No, don't worry, it's Harry. He's heard this talk many times. He's a good friend of mine. But we're going to talk about Transpilers. Just quick show of hands who use Transpiler. Oh, that's a lot of people. I'm going to drop some knowledge on you, and it might scare you a little bit, but we're all going to come out better in the end. So let's start at the beginning. In the beginning was the web, and it sucked. It sucked out loud. And I say this with all the arrogance of someone who does modern web development where I can do like cool stuff. But this was the web back then. No user interactivity, no cool CSS, just this was it. And this was great back in the day. But along came JavaScript, and it was great. It was so good, we wanted to marry it. Like, us nerds, we were like, yes, this is going to change everything. And it did. There's only one problem. JavaScript also, well, it sucked out loud, too. It was terrible. Part of being a good engineer was knowing the bad parts. And there were a lot of bad parts, as you can see. But then something awesome happened. June 17th, 2015. Yeah, I should probably actually watch this. No, June 17th, 2015, Technical Committee 39 released, finalized, and said, it's good to go. ECMAScript 6, or ES6, as you know, or the proper term, ES 2015. And it was good. It was really, really good. It was so good that, man, people that hated JavaScript, they started coming back to it because there's so much good stuff in there. JavaScript was so bad for so long that we just put up with it, but we worked around the bad parts. You know, you always have that new developer new to JavaScript, and he's like, oh, the with keyword, that's awesome, I'm gonna use that. And everyone's like, no, don't do that, don't do that. Why? Because like it doesn't work, it was broken, but we have proxies, destructuring, modules, so much good stuff, I couldn't even fit it in like a 20-minute talk if I wanted to. And what did the community say? We were happy, we loved it, we were beautiful. We made new patterns we couldn't even dream of before. Like this one, lazy evaluated Fibonacci generator using a generator. Fantastic. How do you use it? You just call it like that. How cool is that? Infinite Fibonacci sequence using a generator. That's cool. Like 3 or 4 years ago, I couldn't even dream of this stuff. Now, I get to do it every day. But on June 17th of last year, where were the browsers at? Yeah, you had Firefox and Chrome. They're 30, 40%. But what about Internet Explorer? What about Safari, aka the new Internet Explorer? Yeah, I'm there. I'm just saying. Like, we're there. We're coding. We see like our heroes of JavaScript. They're out there like, check out this cool pattern, check out that cool pattern. And we're like, yeah, I'm going to do that too. And then we go to the browser and we find out, oh, it doesn't work at all. And we're all sad. So what do we do about that? In comes the heroes of our tale, the Transpilers. When I say Transpilers, I mean Tracer, CoffeeScript, TypeScript, Babel. But for this particular talk, we're going to talk about the ECMAScript Transpilers. And that's Tracer and Babel. So everything's good, right? Everything's, no, I expect you guys to say no back. No. Things are good because Transpilers are amazing. They're a marvelous piece of technology, but there's a cost. Oliver Wendell Holmes said, taxes are the price we pay to live in a civilized society. Transpilers are the price we pay to use code that doesn't natively work in a browser. So there is a cost. There's a tax. And you know, tax is Latin for taxium, which means I don't speak Latin at all, and I just made that up. But the fact is there's a cost. There's a serious cost to using Transpilers, and I think we in the community haven't really stopped and thought, I don't know, maybe is it worth it? Let's find out. So today we're going to talk about what is a transpiler. We're going to talk about some of the bad parts. We're going to talk about alternatives, and then we're going to bring it all together. So my name's Jem Young, as you know. I'm a senior UI engineer at Netflix. I work on an amazing team called Acquisitions. You can always tell the Netflix crowd in the audience because they're the loudest in the front. You guys aren't loud at all. But in case you don't know what Netflix does, like our CEO says, we're in the happiness business. We just want to make it so after you get home after a long day coding, you can just relax on the couch with a loved one or your cats, either one. It's all good. But the real question is, why should you listen to me? And this is a question you should always ask of anybody who you're reading their blog post, you see them speak. What makes me qualified to talk about this stuff? Well, for one, I'm really passionate. I've walked these roads, I've stumbled, and I've hit the bad parts, and I'm going to tell you about them so you don't have to. But also, I'm really honest. I'll tell you everything I know, I'll tell you everything I don't know, and hopefully you believe me in the end. For instance, bit of truth, I have seen every single Fast and Furious movie in theaters. That's right, I have paid the $14 or $20, whatever it costs, and I've sat there and watched all 2 hours of all these films. And Fast and Furious 8 coming out next year, be in theaters, front row. Yeah, I know, not many people admit it, but like I said, I'm honest. I know, it's a great segue. But what is a transpiler? It's short for a transcompiler, also called a source-to-source compiler. And all that means, it's a lot of technical jargon, but it just means you convert one language to another language at the same level of abstraction. I know, a lot of tech jargon, blah, 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 I'm getting boring. But let's look at an example. So Python. It's a hello world in Python. Yeah, I'm using function, I don't need to do that, but for sake of argument, it's hello world. Pretty easy. You don't even need to know Python to understand what's going on here, right? So what happens when we compile that? It looks like that. That's a .pyc file. So that's compiling. We can read this, we can't read this. Abstraction. This is CoffeeScript. This is using array comprehension. Anybody ever used array comprehension? Yeah, it's so awesome, isn't it? I really hope it makes it in JavaScript. But just CoffeeScript. And when we transpile that, so you can understand both of those. You can understand the top one, you can understand the bottom one. Different languages, sort of. But they're the same level of abstraction. We can understand both of these. So let's talk about Babel. That converts ES6, ESNext into ES5. So we have something like this, square function, which uses the exponentiation operator, ES7. And when we transpile that, what does it look like? There. You guys understand both of those. It's pretty easy. So that's the difference between transpiling and compiling. Everybody with me? Cool, cool. So now, when we transpile, we can turn that frown upside down. We're all happy engineers. I write ES6 every day. But there's some downsides. There's some bad parts. So when I first started Netflix, super smart dude, Jacques Favreau, he's on the web core team. He wrote this paper called The Impact of Transpiled ES 2015 Appears Significant. I know, it's really, really verbose. But in it, he says, hey, for our team, maybe transpilation isn't necessarily the solution to what we need. Because at Netflix, we care about performance. We care about file size. We care about giving the best experience possible to all our customers. And I read this paper, and it got me thinking. I said, wow, I use this stuff. I've been using it for like a year or two now, and I've never actually thought about what's happening in the background. I never thought about the implications of using a transpiler. And it really got me thinking. He had some awesome points in there, and I'm going to highlight some of those points a little bit later. But this guy, my personal hero for at least till the next 6 months, till my next personal hero comes out. So I'm going to take the easy road. I'm going to beat the slow horse in the race. Transpilation adds build time. That's just a simple fact. You can't get around that. And you're saying, but Jem, I've got my less, and I got my Sass convert to CSS. I've got my uglifier, my minifier, my tree shaker, my bundler. All those are in there, and that's all server-side. It doesn't affect the client at all. Well, what about your engineers? If you have 10 engineers pushing 10 times a day, which is very low, and your transpiler runs every time, and transpilation takes 2 seconds, that's 3.5 hours a day. Like, I don't know how much you guys get paid, but that's a lot of wasted money. And if we're going to be senior engineers, we're going to be future leaders in the JavaScript community, we have to think about stuff like this. Transpiled code is just heavier. it's it's mean to say, but it is. It's just massive. And this isn't knocking against Transpilers or the maintainers, but it's just bigger. That's almost always what happens. We saw the CoffeeScript example. We got transpiled, that one line got transpiled into 6. That almost invariably happens with transpilation. That's just the cost. So what's wrong with it being heavier? Let's take a simple class. I know, not everybody likes classes. I love them, but bear with me. This is just a simple class. Getter, setter. What does this look like transpiled? That's a lot bigger. Now, this one's easy. You guys probably knew that. What about, remember that example we saw with the generator? What does this look like? Yep, some people already know what's coming, yeah. Oh, that hurts. That hurts my heart right here. When, we're trying to shave off those milliseconds to increase performance on the client side. They've got to run through all this. We have to think about things like this. Transpiled code is slower, in general. There are some things that are at parity now, but in general, they're slower. And one of the reasons, it's just denser. The interpreter has to run through a lot more stuff. This guy, Kevin Decker, awesome, he wrote this GitHub page called 6speed. And in it, he runs through ES6 features and compares them against Chrome, Firefox, Node. And then he runs against Babel, TypeScript, the various things. But what's interesting is it's almost invariably slower. So let's look at this simple one, default parameters. I love default parameters. It's like one of those sanity things that should have been in JavaScript, but wasn't. But look at Babel. We'll use Babel, we'll use Node, and it's 1.3 times slower. And you're saying, not a big deal. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of times a second, 1.3, negligible. Totally true. What about Tracer? What does that compile to? That's a little worse. Oh, wait. Firefox 49, it runs 3,000 times slower. 3,000 times, like, that's noticeable. Somewhere, there is some engineer saying, what the hell? Like, this doesn't make sense. And if I had to guess, it's probably that void call, which returns undefined. It's a safe way of calling it undefined, but in Firefox, it's probably not optimized. But you have to understand these things if you're going to use a transpiler. You have to be able to dig into the code and say, oh, there it is. Maybe I shouldn't use this. Again, things to keep in mind. Now, I love ES6. I don't want you guys to get the wrong impression. I love ES6. I love ES7. I love Transpilers. I've given talks on it. But right now, I know I sound like just some bitter person going on a rant like an old man, which is super ironic because my last name is Young. But I just want you guys to keep this in mind. In JavaScript, we're so quick to jump to the latest, hottest thing. You go to the coffee shop, you're like, hey, I just learned React. You're like, cool, you using Flux? You're like, what's Flux? Come back next week. Oh, I just learned Flux. No. They're like, no, Flumux, man. You're like way behind. You're like, crap, I feel bad about myself. I come back the next week. I learned Flumux. I'm so great right now. Dude, Redux, you are so far behind. But that's the JavaScript community, and it's great, but it's also bad at the same time. We keep jumping on new things. We never stop to think, what's actually happening? I just want to keep you guys informed. Let's talk about the dream. And no, I don't mean the dream of the 90s. I mean the dream of ECMAScript. The idea was, hey, I'm going to use this transpiler until browsers catch up, right? That was the dream, and then we just take it out of the build stack, like no problem. Very fluid. Not true. Why? Again, Safari, Internet Explorer, mobile Safari. These things are never going to catch up. They're never going to run ES6 natively. So unless you want to just say, screw you to 3/4 of your customers, you're always going to have to transpile. So I believed in the dream. I bought in. I was like, yeah, we'll just take it out. But I never thought a year from now, 2 years from now, down the road, where we're going to be. And here's where we are. We're always going to be stuck using transpilers. Not necessarily a bad thing, but again, keep it in mind. Let's not lie to ourselves anymore and say, oh, no, we'll just take it out and everything will be good. That's not true. So in open source, what's the one thing we fear? Vendor lock-in. That's so terrible. Proprietary stuff. $1 million contracts to use a SQL database. We hate that. And we're like, open source, no, we can fix that. But with transpilers, you are locked in. You have to use a transpiler. Other than that, you rewrite all your code. Have we thought about that? Have we considered that? Now, my good friend, Harry Wolf, who yelled boo earlier, yes, he's my good friend, he said transpilers take you further away from the metal, which is true. JavaScript doesn't inherently run on the computer. Like it doesn't. The CPU is not running directly. We're talking about it runs through an interpreter. There's like a whole bunch of other steps. But for sake of argument, yeah, it doesn't run on the metal. But transpilation, it just takes it a little bit further away. So what happens when we do stuff like that? We have to debug it. We have to debug in production. You guys ever done that? You ever debugged minified code in production? Yeah, it's terrible. It gives you nightmares. Sometimes I don't like to think about it. But some of you are saying, oh, Jem, what about source maps? Source maps save the day. And yes, they do. They're awesome. Like, amazing bit of technology I never even thought of. But when I used it, I was like, whew, saved. But you can't ship source maps to production. Like, what's the point of minifying? So source maps there. But also, your bundle will increase, 10, 20 times? Those things are huge. So you have to ask yourself, if I'm using Transpiler, can I read ES 2015 code that's been transpiled down to ES5 in production? Can you? Something to think about. And there's a whole tool chain. Because for a long time, Node didn't support ES6. So our linter didn't support ES6. Now, thank God, ESLint has caught up. But for a long time, it didn't. We had to use Babel ESLint. We had to use code coverage tools that, code coverage is completely broke for a long time because they haven't caught up. There's a whole tool chain reliant on the code being ES5. And when you write ES6, you're like, oh, crap. We haven't thought of that. We have so many dependencies. Anybody remember LeftPad? That wasn't that long ago. We have a lot of dependencies in JavaScript, and we never think, oh, there's a cost to using these. What about your tests? Do you write your tests in ES6 or ES5? Do you transpile your tests? Do you transpile the code that runs against the tests? I don't know about you, but at Netflix, every time we push, before we push to GitHub, all the tests run. Now, if I have to transpile every single time, that's just time wasted. That's hours wasted. And overall, it's like a subtle, angry rage that builds up. You're like, come on. And then when the tests get done running, there's an error. You're like, oh, son of a. They told me I couldn't swear. But I was like, fudge you guys, man. I'll do what I want. But waiting for the tests to finish, and you have to wait an extra step for the transpilation, that would drive me insane. Do we think about these things when we're writing ES6 and using transpilers? So this one has got me. We make false assumptions about what's going to be in JavaScript. Much like Brown Earl Spillner in his pivotal race against Dominic Toretto in Fast and Furious 1, he hit that NOS too soon, man. He hit it too soon, he jumped the gun, and he lost. I've done that too. I've given talks about, next year decorator is going to be in JavaScript. You know what stage decorators are at? Stage 0. Still stage 0. You go across the internet, people are like, oh yeah, in 2015 or 2016, decorator is definitely going to be in there. Not in JavaScript. Might never make it into JavaScript. What about double bind or function bind, double colon? I think that's ugly personally, but my personal opinion. But that's in stage 0 too. You can do that with Babel. You can just flip a switch, and you're good to go. But what if it never makes it to JavaScript? Are you going to rewrite all your code now? You're saying, I'll just use JS code shift and I'll just run that. Well, there's a cost to that. There's a migration cost. Now, have you thought about this never makes it to JavaScript? You're always going to be stuck using the same version of Babel because Babel might drop it eventually. And you're saying, well, don't worry, Jem. Screw you and your blue shorts. I got the solution. I'll just use something at stage 3 and above because stage 3 is pretty safe, right? That's going to make it to JavaScript for sure. Well, no. What about object.observe, remember that, the hype around that? Yeah, where's that now? Dropped completely. It made it stage 3, it got dropped. So you might have built a whole framework around object.observe, which people did, and now they're getting burned by it because all that code is useless because it'll never run natively in the browser. You have to transpile it every time. Again, do we think about these things before we do them? If we're going to be great leaders, we have to think about it. Polyfills. Now, the infinite lazy Fibonacci sequence, great. And I showed you this. It's pretty bad, right? Well, I may have left off the regenerator runtime. It's a little bit bigger. There's more. Yeah. Now, question. But question. If I'm using a generator one time, I'm including this every single time. Is it worth it? Is your use case worth it? Think about that for the users. This is a non-trivial amount of code to include for one thing. Now, some of you are saying, Jem, I got you again. You're just so dumb looking tall and handsome in your blue shorts. I'll just take the polyfills out, and I'll put them at the top, and I'll just include them globally. Well, that's true. That would work. But that paper we talked about earlier, Jock found, even using a basic class, just transpilation with the additional polyfills in the boilerplate, it's 48% bigger, just using basic class. Now, if you take out the boilerplate, it's still 10% bigger. Now, in the world of commerce and transactions where 100 milliseconds makes a difference between a sale and not, 10% can matter. That adds up. And at Netflix, that's something we think about every day. We think about that constantly. Are these things worth it? Now, I've been bashing for so long, and you guys are like, oh, he's so full of hate and vitriol. He really hates transpilers. And no, I think they're amazing. Without transpilers, we couldn't write next-level JavaScript. And without next-level JavaScript, the language would stagnate. We wouldn't get anywhere. So one alternative is to use plugins. Babel is extremely modular. How about you just include the things you use, and then don't include the things you don't use? It's pretty simple. It's a lot more work. It is a lot more work because you have to be more explicit. But if you do this, your code will get smaller, the transpilation will get faster. And hell, even Babel says on the website, out of the box, Babel doesn't do anything. You have to use plugins. Now, most people just use the default ES 2015 plugin, which is good, but that includes probably a lot of stuff you don't need. But if you're more explicit, you can get around all these problems. That's a good alternative. Another one is to use Lodash. So array.includes is in ES7. It's one of two things, exponentiation and array.includes. Now you guys are ES7 experts. Easy. But you can do it on Lodash, too. You can do array.from. You can do a lot of things on Lodash that you can't do in native ES5, and they're still useful. You don't have to transpile any of this. So my ultimate solution, and not ultimate, but I think it's a pretty good one, I wrote a thing. It's called LiveTranspiler. And what it does is it uses a service worker, and it transpiles the code in the browser so that if I'm running Chrome 52 or something that well supports CS6, I just send the code through. Seamless. If I'm running Safari, boo. I transpile it on the client side very fast because it's in a separate thread using a service worker. This isn't ideal. This isn't production or anything, but it's a start. This is probably the future of where we're going to go because we don't always want to transpile every time. There's costs, as we discussed before. There's tax on these things. I think this is a pretty good idea. Hopefully someone takes it and runs with it. So I talked a lot about theoretical concepts and kind of abstract things. Let's talk about what I actually do, what my team does at Netflix. In that paper that Jacques wrote, we figured out let, const, template strings, restructuring, arrow functions. These are all very minimal, very low-cost things to transpile, and that's what we do. We use a combination of Babel and Lodash, and it gets the job done. And we have total freedom and responsibility. If I want to include a generator in my code, I can do it. But it's on me to make sure that's performant and doesn't bog down the entire website. So this is a good solution. I'm not saying it's your solution, but it's something that works for us. And we do a lot of traffic. We do enough traffic to break the internet without Open Connect. So, I mean, this is an effective solution. Again, because I know somebody, despite how many times I say it, I know somebody's out there like, man, you really hate transpilers, don't you? No! Again, we cannot move forward as a community if we're writing the same old code, and we can't improve JavaScript. So I love transpilers. I think they're fantastic. Every single person that maintains Babel or Tracer, amazing, smart people, much smarter than I am. I just humbly use them. But stage 4 of JavaScript, to get something approved means it needs to be implemented in 2 browsers, and it needs to have significant real-world testing. And we can't test it unless we have transpilers, because we need to see how it fits into our code. So we have to use transpilers and keep using them. Find the bugs, be aware of the costs, and be better engineers. I have some links. I have a link to LiveTranspiler. I have the Babel REPL, which is good. I have the Tracer REPL, and I have the performance. Everybody, if you're writing ES6, you're using Transpiler, you should go to this page and just look at the cost. It's slower, but to me, the trade-off is worth it for a lot of things. My code is much cleaner. It's much more elegant. I prefer to write ES6 all the time, but again, there's a cost. I just want to make you guys aware of it. I'm around the web, Jem Young, at Jem Young. You can tweet me, or you can fight me in real life. Good luck. Kidding, don't fight me. I'm a really nice guy. I'm on a podcast called Front End Happy Hour where we get drunk and talk about front-end things. It's a lot of fun. It's true. These are smart people you should follow on Twitter. They've really helped me out during this presentation, but they're very, very smart people, much smarter than I am. So follow them on Twitter. And that's it. Thank you. Hopefully you learned something today.
Thank you, thank you. Come on over. You are just a gem. A young gem, some might even say.
Oh,
thank
man.
you, Adam. He really appreciated that. Awesome. Okay, so I want you to imagine your top favorite ES6 features. Don't tell me, just imagine them.
Okay.
Now, what is your 6th favorite?
Ooh, that's tough. So top 3 modules, because they're awesome. It's good we standardized it.
Oh, no, I'm not interested in this.
I just need to go through it mentally.
Oh, okay.
So 3, 6. I like proxies.
Proxies.
Yeah, only because we haven't even explored the patterns we can use to do that. And I've seen some really cool, really smart people doing some things with proxies that are just, wow.
It's just a whole other talk in itself. No?
It really is. I'm looking forward to digging
Giving
in a little
it
deeper.
next year.
Uh,
Perfect. Okay. So of the 7 Fast and the Furious movies, which one was your favorite?
Third one. See, yeah. Tokyo Drift was like the
Awful.
seminal movement. How dare you? It was the seminal movement in the Fast and Furious because they actually did real drifting. Those were real drivers. Unlike Fast and Furious 2, which is the worst one, because it was all CGI bullcrap.
Tell us your real feelings, please. All right. Okay, so given that you work at Netflix, what's going to happen on the next season of House of Cards?
Ooh. Well, Robin Wright kills Kevin Spacey.
Okay.
And then she nukes the South because she's really ashamed of where she came from.
Interesting. I did not see
story.
that coming. It's a weird twist. Weird twist.
You know,
okay.
you go 5 seasons, you really got to start like reaching.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
I feel you. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.